Do you think silence in a family says more than shouting?
The last time I heard my mother's voice, it wasn't some dramatic goodbye or a tearful phone call filled with regret. No, it was a casual, flat-toned brush-off delivered over the line like she was reading a grocery list. I had just come home from the hospital after a 3-day stay following what turned out to be a severe panic attack. I'd thought it was a heart issue, tight chest, shaking arms, blurred vision, and in that moment of vulnerability, lying in a white, too bright ER bed, I realized something bone deep. I had no one to call. Not really. Not anyone who would show up. Not anymore. But still, I tried. I picked up the phone, called my mother, and explained what had happened. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for anything, really. Just called because I needed to hear someone say they were glad I was okay. And she replied, after a short silence, "You're grown now, Rachel. Handle your own problems." There was no malice in her voice, no anger, not even concern, just the detached neutrality of someone trying to end a call before it started. And in that split second, I felt something hard and cold settle in the middle of my chest. You know that moment when you finally realize someone you've been trying to reach emotionally for years has never once actually met you halfway? That was it. Right there. My mom. My blood. My so-called lifeline. Writing me off because apparently being over 40 means you're not allowed to hurt anymore. Being an adult meant I wasn't allowed to ask for warmth. She didn't ask if I had someone to drive me home. Didn't check if I had food in the fridge or anyone watching over me that night. The call ended quickly, with a clipped goodbye and the kind of silence that makes your skin feel too tight. And the worst part? I didn't even cry. I just stood there in my kitchen, lights off, in the same sweatshirt I'd worn to the ER, and let the silence crawl over me like fog. But fine. That was the last straw, right? The line was drawn, whether she meant to draw it or not. So I told myself, if I'm really that grown, if I'm so independent that my pain is inconvenient, then okay. I'd own it. But they'd have to live with what that meant too. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. Didn't send a dramatic group message or a final emotional monologue about fairness. I simply let go. I made a quiet decision, the kind that doesn't make noise but changes everything. I wouldn't beg anymore, not for attention, not for connection, not for love. Fast forward about 4 weeks. I was on my lunch break, eating a sad sandwich in my car, scrolling on my phone just to kill time. I hadn't heard a single word from either of my parents since that call. Nothing from my brother, either, but that wasn't new. Eric had always lived in a separate universe, one where family existed only when it was convenient. And then, suddenly, I saw it. A Facebook post. My brother, grinning from ear to ear, holding up a wine glass on some white sand beach with his fiancée, no, wait, his wife. The caption read, "Couldn't have dreamed of a more perfect wedding. Thanks to Mom and Dad for the gift of a lifetime. Cabo, baby. Cabo. All-inclusive. Destination wedding. Paid for." I blinked. Read it again. And for a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Because just 4 weeks before, I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if I was dying, and not one of those people thought I was worth a visit or a call back. But they had $10,000, maybe more, for a beachfront wedding and matching embroidered robes for the entire bridal party. My mom couldn't return my call, but she could book a first-class ticket to Mexico. I zoomed in on the photos. My parents on loungers with tropical drinks. My dad, sunburnt and smiling in a Hawaiian shirt like some proud sitcom father. My mom, wearing the same white sunglasses I had once complimented and been told were too expensive for just hanging out. Eric and his wife doing tequila shots with their friends, all of them tan and happy, the ocean glittering behind them like something out of a damn commercial. I didn't rage. I didn't scream into my steering wheel or sob into my sandwich. I just stared, feeling the weight of 1,000 tiny disappointments finally coalescing into one clear, final message. I had never been the favorite. I had never even been close. All my life I'd tried to be the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't need help. And I thought, maybe if I kept being that person, eventually they'd notice. Eventually, they'd care. But the truth hit me like a freight train. They liked that I didn't need them. They relied on it. Because loving me meant effort, and loving Eric? That was easy. He had always been the golden boy, The one who got the new car in high school while I was taking the bus. The one who got help with college tuition while I worked 2 jobs and still left school in debt. And now, years later, when I needed someone the most, they gave me the same treatment they always had. Silence for me, confetti for him. So I made another decision. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. I logged onto my phone, opened up my contacts, and hit block on every single one of them. No message. No warning. No goodbye. Just a clean slate, like deleting spam emails. It was the kind of revenge that doesn't feel like revenge at first, it feels like peace. And here's the thing. I didn't expect them to notice. Not really. I figured I'd vanish quietly, and they'd go back to their perfect little world where I was just some blurry character in the background of family photos. But I was wrong. Because less than a week later, the emails started. One after the other. Short, strange, pathetic. My dad, who hadn't spoken to me since my divorce, wrote, "We're family. We stick together. Why would you do this?" My mother sent a long one, filled with spiritual quotes and passive-aggressive questions like, "Don't you believe in forgiveness?" And then, my brother, of all people, sent a picture from the honeymoon with a single line, "Wish you were here." That was the moment I knew this wouldn't just blow over. Because silence, the kind that comes after decades of trying and finally giving up, is louder than any scream they've ever heard. But let me ask you this. When someone tells you over and over that you're on your own, that they can't help you, that your problems are just part of being a grown-up, and then they turn around and give everything to someone else, someone who's never gone without, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Would you stay? Or would you, like I did, finally walk away and mean it? I remember sitting in bed that night, laptop open, lights off, scrolling through post after post from my brother's wedding with this strange feeling boiling up in my chest, not quite jealousy and not quite sadness, but something in between. Something sour and metallic and hard to name, like swallowing a coin and feeling it sit there, lodged just beneath your ribs. I wasn't crying, not even close, but I felt this heat behind my eyes, a kind of rage that had no direction, no volume, just weight, heavy and pressing, the kind that doesn't explode, it simmers. I watched videos of their vows under a flower-wrapped canopy, of guests in sundresses and linen suits clinking glasses by the ocean, of my parents dancing, actually dancing, to some cheesy love song like they hadn't spent the last 20 years looking through me like I was a pile of unpaid bills. I'd been told my entire life that there wasn't enough to go around. Not enough time, not enough money, not enough help to split between 2 kids, so I stopped asking for my share, convinced myself I didn't need it anyway. I figured if I made myself small, unburdensome, self-sufficient, they'd love me just for the ease of it. But they didn't. They just learned how to live without me. Or worse, how to use me as the contrast that made my brother's life shine even brighter. Eric got the spotlight. I got the flashlight and told to find my own damn way. I remember once, when I was 23 and trying to leave Derek after he'd cheated on me for the second time with some waitress from his gym, I called home in the middle of the night, whispering from the bathroom while he slept in the next room. I asked Mom if I could come stay for a few days until I figured things out, just somewhere to breathe. She sighed loudly and said, "I thought you said you were grown, Rachel. You chose him. Handle it." I slept in my car that night, parked behind a grocery store with the driver's seat laid back and a hoodie wrapped around my knees like a blanket. The next day, Eric posted a photo of his new apartment with a caption about fresh starts, and Mom commented, "So proud of you, sweetie. You always land on your feet." So when I saw that Cabo wedding, when I saw them clapping and laughing in the sand like they were the Kennedy Dam family, I didn't see joy, I saw a verdict. I saw the unspoken message written in every smile. This is who we celebrate. This is who we show up for. And I think that's the part that cut the deepest, not that they gave him everything, but that they made it look so easy, so natural, like love and support had always been abundant, just never for me. I tried briefly, irrationally, to reason with it. Maybe they'd been saving up. Maybe Eric had paid for most of it and they were just guests. But then I saw the tags. Gift from Mom and Dad. Thanks for covering our dream week. My mother had even posted a photo of her manicured hand holding a margarita, with a caption that read, "Nothing like treating your kids right." Right. Right, of course. As long as kids meant one child in particular. The one who called home twice a week, even if he had nothing to say. The one who never told them no. The one who hadn't once visited me after my surgery, but sent flowers to our parents for no reason 3 times a year. And I realized something else as I stared at their perfectly filtered faces and sunburned grins. They didn't expect me to care. Not really. They'd made peace with losing me a long time ago, or maybe they never had me to begin with. Maybe I was just a chapter in the family scrapbook they skipped over every time they told their friends about their wonderful son in tech, the one with the beautiful new wife and the vacation tan. I was the fine print. The footnote. The woman who didn't need anything, didn't ask for anything, and therefore got exactly that. I don't know what people expect when they push someone away over and over, and then act surprised when that person finally stops standing on the porch. I don't know if they thought I'd see those photos and smile politely, maybe send a text like, "Looks amazing. So happy for you." I don't know what fantasy they live in where love doesn't require reciprocity, where a daughter's silence is just a phase, easily ignored. But I know this. I didn't owe them anything anymore. So I logged onto my phone, opened my family group chat, the one I hadn't typed into since last Christmas when I got a single-word reply to a "Merry Christmas" text Mom had just sent you too. I hovered over the thread, tapped the info button, and hit leave conversation. Then I went into my contacts, Mom, Dad, Eric, and one by one I blocked them. No warning. No explanation. Not because I wanted them to wonder what they did wrong, but because they already knew. It wasn't an outburst. It was an ending. And endings don't always come with soundtracks or slammed doors. Sometimes they're just a quiet choice, made in the dim light of your bedroom while your laptop hums on your knees and the photos of someone else's perfect life keep scrolling by. And still, after all of that, I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd never notice. Maybe I really had made myself so invisible that I could disappear completely, and they'd carry on, none the wiser. But then, a few days later, my email pinged. One message. From Dad. Just 3 words. "Are you okay?" It wasn't love. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Fear that I was finally gone, not just in body but in heart. And let me tell you, fear feels a lot like justice when you've spent your whole life begging to be seen. But the thing about justice is, it doesn't care who's uncomfortable. And neither did I. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, at least not at first. It was dense, like standing in the middle of a fog-choked street where even your own breath feels like a burden, and every second without contact stretched out long and hollow. Echoing with every moment I had ever convinced myself that I was overreacting, too sensitive, too dramatic for noticing what I wasn't getting from the people who were supposed to love me without condition. It's a strange thing, realizing that your absence causes more commotion than your presence ever did. I didn't announce my exit, didn't leave behind a dramatic voicemail or a carefully worded letter, just severed the connections in quiet clicks and blocks, and watched the notifications stop like someone had unplugged a machine that had never truly served me to begin with. In the first few days, nothing happened, which confirmed what I had always feared but never wanted to admit. I wasn't part of the machinery, not in the way they were, not in the way my brother was. Not in the way that would cause anyone to pause their lives for even a breath if I vanished. And I told myself that was okay, that I didn't want the kind of love that required begging or convincing or constant proof of worth, but deep down, in the part of me that still remembered birthdays forgotten and favors never returned, it stung. But then, the emails started, not texts, not calls, because I had removed those paths already, but emails, which somehow made it worse, as if they were writing to a stranger, someone whose address they had scribbled down once and then lost in a drawer until now, when suddenly it mattered that I wasn't where they left me. The first email came from my father, who had always been the quieter parent, the one who deferred to my mother's decisions, the one who told me, during my divorce, "You're tough, Rach. You'll get through it," like I was a houseplant that could survive off dust and regret. His message was short, 3 lines at most, and read more like a memo than anything else. "Hey, your mom's been trying to reach you. We're not sure what's going on. Can you let us know you're okay? No apology, no reflection, not even an acknowledgement of the years of being dismissed, just a vague concern that something might be wrong, not because they missed me, but because my absence was an inconvenience, a mystery to solve, a loose thread in their carefully curated family image. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another email came through, this time from my mother, and it was longer, wordier, laced with passive-aggressive guilt and Bible verses she hadn't cared about since the Clinton administration. She started with a greeting so saccharine it felt like a slap. "Sweetheart, I don't know why you're doing this to us." As if I had woken up one day and decided to cut them off for fun, as if decades of being overlooked and underloved had no bearing on the present. As if their betrayal wasn't layered and slow and silent enough to make even the most loyal child eventually choose absence over indignity. She went on to list family milestones I had missed: Eric's wedding brunch, a cousin's baby shower, some barbecue in June, as if my failure to attend those events was a crime greater than their failure to show up for me when I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering whether I mattered to anyone. And still, I didn't reply. But the emails kept coming, each one a variation of the same theme: confusion, denial, subtle blame. "Family is all we have," one said. "We've always loved you," said another, conveniently omitting the terms and conditions they had attached to that love over the years. And in the middle of all that noise came a message that stopped me cold, one single line, no punctuation, no context, just a subject line from Eric's email. I had no idea. That one made me pause. Because maybe that was true. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he'd been so wrapped up in his golden boy glow, so used to having things handed to him, so surrounded by approval and celebration, that he hadn't noticed what was missing, not from the family photos, not from the guest lists, but from me. Or maybe it was just another manipulation, a way to pull me back in, to reset the clock and pretend nothing ever happened. Either way, I didn't open it. Not yet. The funny thing is, people talk about ghosting like it's cruel, like it's a coward's way out, but sometimes, silence is the only language they understand. Because I had spent years saying what I needed, what hurt, what felt unfair, and every time I spoke, I was told that life wasn't fair, that I needed to be stronger, that my problems were mine to solve because I was an adult, because I was the responsible one. The one who didn't crumble, the one who always made it work. Well, they were right about one thing: I am grown. And being grown doesn't mean suffering in silence or playing the role they've written for you just because it makes everyone else more comfortable. Being grown means choosing peace over proximity. It means not lighting yourself on fire to keep a cold house warm. And above all, it means knowing when enough has finally become enough. I didn't ghost them out of spite. I ghosted them because staying would have been a betrayal of everything I had finally come to understand about myself, my worth, and the weight of carrying a family that only ever showed up when there was something in it for them. A week passed. Then 2. Then 4. And the silence shifted. It stopped being heavy. It started feeling like space, room to breathe, to exist without explanation, to be someone outside the roles I'd been forced into. I began to notice how quiet peace actually is, how much energy I used to spend bracing for the next dismissal, the next ignored message, the next condescending lecture about how grown women don't ask for help. I had built a life around surviving the absence of love, and now that I was living in it on purpose, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. But that freedom came with clarity, too, and clarity is a double-edged thing. Because now that I had finally stepped away, now that I had made myself fully unreachable, the game had changed. And the thing about silence is, it doesn't erase the damage. It just makes people finally hear the echo of what they refused to listen to for years. And when the next email arrived, with a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, I realized this story wasn't over. Because ghosts don't just disappear, they come back. Especially when the ones they haunt start wondering what made them vanish in the first place. There comes a point when anger, the loud, blazing kind that burns hot and wild and fast, cools into something denser, something sharper and more calculated, like a knife forged out of old betrayals and left to chill until it can cut without effort. And that's exactly where I found myself after weeks of ignoring their pleading emails, their half-baked attempts at reconciliation, their pitiful guilt-drenched declarations of familial love that rang hollow after a lifetime of selective attention and uneven affection. I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt clarity, and in that clarity, I saw the landscape of my childhood, adolescence, and adult years with the sort of precision that only distance provides, the kind of brutal, unflinching vision that strips the paint off every pretty story you've been told and reveals the rotting wood underneath. And as I stood in the kitchen one Sunday morning, watching the coffee drip slow and steady into the pot like a clock counting down something final, I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was done. Not performatively done, not temporarily hurt, not hoping they would suddenly show up with real apologies or changed behavior. No. I had reached the place they never expected me to find peace in their absence. And that's when I decided, with the same quiet deliberation that led me to block their numbers, that I was going to send one final message. Not a monologue. Not a desperate cry for understanding. Just a clean incision. Precise. I wasn't writing it for them. I was writing it for me. I opened a blank email, stared at the blinking cursor for a few minutes, and then typed slowly, deliberately, letting each word rise from the place inside me that had swallowed its voice for too many years. It's not that I'm angry, I wrote, and it's not that I hate you, because hate would imply you had enough of a presence in my life to inspire something so powerful. It's that I finally believe you. I finally understand that when you told me I was grown, that I had to handle things alone, you meant it. And I'm honoring that. I am grown. And grown women do not beg for scraps of affection. They do not plead to be seen. They do not knock twice on a door that has never been opened to them willingly. So please, continue to enjoy the family you've built without me. Just don't insult me by pretending now that I was ever truly part of it. No sign-off. No warmth. Just the truth. And after I hit send, I felt no surge of triumph, no adrenaline rush, just an immense, silent release. Like unhooking a weight from your back and standing up straight for the first time in years. They didn't reply right away. Of course they didn't. Because people like that, people who've grown used to you carrying the weight of the relationship, rarely know how to respond when you finally set it down. But they did respond eventually. In waves. A slow-building flood of guilt masquerading as love, concern that stank of self-preservation more than remorse. My mother wrote back within a day, her message a twisted knot of nostalgia and veiled scolding. "You're being cruel," she said, "and I don't understand where all this is coming from. You've always been so strong. Why now? Why turn your back on the people who love you?" And it hit me in that moment how insidious the word strong can be when used as a muzzle, how often it's wielded to silence those of us who are suffering quietly because to show pain would disrupt the story others want to tell about you, that you're independent, that you're capable, that you're fine without the things they never bothered to give. My father's reply came a few days later and was even shorter, more guarded. "We were just trying to make memories with your brother while we still can. Life's short. You'll understand one day." That line stuck in my mind like a splinter, "while we still can," as if their mortality now gave them permission to erase a lifetime of imbalance and offer nothing but weak justifications. And I thought to myself, if life's so short, then why waste even one more second pretending that the people who broke you accidentally are capable of fixing you intentionally? Eric, for his part, tried to stay out of the line of fire. His message came about a week later and was the most honest, or at least the most disarmed of the three. "I had no idea," he wrote again, this time with more beneath the surface. "I thought things were fine. I didn't know Mom and Dad made you feel that way. They always said you didn't like help, that you liked doing things your way." I didn't respond. Because by now, I had learned that explaining myself to people who weren't listening the first time is just another form of self-betrayal. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while I didn't want to scream or throw punches or send long rants about fairness, I did want them to feel what I had felt, what it meant to be erased without warning, what it meant to have your existence quietly scrubbed from the story without anyone asking why. So one night, long after the sun had gone down and the only sound in my apartment was the low hum of the fridge, I logged into our shared family photo cloud, the same one we'd been adding to for over a decade. It held thousands of pictures, birthdays, holidays, graduations, family vacations, every stage of our lives cataloged and frozen in digital amber. And I went through them one by one, identifying every photo where I appeared. Some were small, me holding a sparkler at a 4th of July picnic, me in the background of a Thanksgiving table, me holding Eric's first baby niece with an uncertain smile. Others were more prominent: childhood Christmas mornings, old prom pictures, blurry shots of me blowing out birthday candles in a kitchen I no longer remembered. And I deleted every single one. Not out of spite. Out of symmetry. They had already erased me emotionally. I was just making it literal. The next day, Eric emailed me again. "Did you delete all the photos?" "What the hell, Rachel?" And I just stared at the screen, not angry, not smug, but resolved. Because maybe now he'd feel it, the space where I used to be. Maybe now, when they scrolled through the curated image of our family, they'd notice the holes, the missing shapes, the proof that I was never fully there, not in the way they claimed, not in the way that matters when things fall apart. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. Sometimes it's subtraction. Quiet, deliberate, final. Not because you want them to hurt, but because you want them to know you were never invisible. You were simply watching, waiting, measuring the weight of every slight until you could finally walk away with your dignity intact and your hands clean. And the next time they look for me in photos, in memories, in emails, I hope they find nothing but absence. The kind that lingers. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that says, "This was your choice. I just made it permanent." It's a strange kind of awakening when the space you once filled in a family begins to feel more like a wound than a home, when the people who raised you become ghosts still walking the earth, familiar in form but hollow in presence, and you find yourself navigating a version of adulthood you were never taught to expect, one where love doesn't arrive just because you need it, and loyalty isn't owed just because of shared blood. In the 6 months that followed my final act of quiet erasure, the deletion of every trace of myself from our shared family memories, I began to experience a version of life that didn't revolve around longing, disappointment, or second chances. It was a version shaped by silence, sharpened by clarity, and, in a way I never anticipated, defined by peace. I won't romanticize it. There were days when the loneliness pressed in close, whispering old doubts into the hollow spaces. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I should have picked up just once, replied just once, explained just once more. But every time that temptation rose, I reminded myself that this wasn't punishment I was living in. It was a boundary, one drawn with painstaking care and hardened by the repeated lesson that not everyone who calls themselves family has earned the right to remain in your life simply because they were there at the beginning. I had stopped reaching for the door that never opened, and instead I began building one of my own, one that led inward, to a life that didn't depend on the validation of people who had always chosen someone else. I started doing things I had never made time for when I was too busy trying to prove I deserved to be loved the same way my brother was: long hikes through quiet forests, Saturday mornings spent at thrift stores flipping through dusty old records, evenings reading without checking my phone every few minutes for some reply that would never come. I didn't suddenly become some shining beacon of self-love or an expert in detachment. I was simply surviving in a new direction, no longer spiraling toward people who had shown me they couldn't or wouldn't love me in the way I needed. Not because they were monsters, but because they simply didn't know how to see me unless I was serving a purpose. And then, one cold afternoon in early December, when the days were shortening and the world seemed to hold its breath between seasons, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter in an envelope that bore my mother's neat, slanted handwriting, the same script I used to see on permission slips and birthday cards back when things were simpler, or at least when I was too young to see clearly. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to open it or burn it, because I knew whatever was inside would carry weight, would stir things I had spent months settling. But curiosity won, as it often does when silence has stretched on long enough to dull the edges of pain, and I slid it open with a butter knife, letting the folded paper slide out like a confession. The letter wasn't long, but it was heavy with intention, heavy with the kind of phrases people use when they aren't ready to say sorry, but want to be forgiven anyway. "You don't know what it feels like to be shut out by your own child," she wrote. You don't understand how much we've hurt since you walked away. Family is all we have, Rachel. You can't just erase that. And I sat there, letter in hand, in the dim light of my kitchen, and thought about how often those words had been used as both shield and sword. Family is all we have, the phrase that was supposed to excuse years of imbalance, of emotional negligence, of favoritism disguised as practicality. And for the first time, I said it out loud, not to her, not to anyone, but to myself. Then maybe you should have treated me like I was part of it. There was no bitterness in my voice, no heat, just the steady truth of a person who had finally learned that blood may tie people together, but it doesn't guarantee kindness or empathy or even basic decency. I folded the letter back up, slid it into the envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer, not because I planned to keep it as some sacred memento, but because I wasn't ready to destroy it either. Some truths deserve to exist in a physical form, if only to remind you that they happened, that you weren't imagining the cold. Later that week, I sat down and began to draft a response. Not to send, just to write. I wanted to give myself the space to say all the things I never had room to speak. I wrote about the hospital visit and the silence that followed, about all the birthdays where my name was an afterthought, the holidays spent alone while they posted photos with Eric, about the years of being the one who didn't need much, when in reality I was just better at pretending I wasn't drowning. I poured it all onto the page, every memory, every small cut that had accumulated into the wound that finally bled out. And when I finished, I folded the letter, walked to the kitchen sink, and burned it. No theatrics, no tears, just fire, paper, ash. The next day, another email arrived, this time from Eric. The subject line was the same as before. I had no idea, but the body was different. Longer. More vulnerable. He wrote about how he had always looked up to me, even if he never said it, how he assumed I had things figured out because I never complained, never asked for anything, and how he had started to realize that maybe he hadn't been the golden child so much as he had been the easier one, the one whose needs were simple, whose expectations were always met. He ended the email with a line I hadn't expected. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not to defend them. Just to listen. And that's where I leave this story. Not with a dramatic reunion, not with forgiveness tied in a neat bow, but with a question mark, the kind that keeps you wondering whether the door I had closed was sealed forever or simply waiting for someone to knock differently. I haven't answered him yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Because sometimes, the power isn't in the response, it's in knowing you no longer owe one. Family, they say, is all we have. But what they never tell you is that family can also be the first place where you learn to doubt your worth, the first place where you're taught to carry your pain quietly, to make space for others while shrinking yourself. And walking away from that kind of family? That isn't betrayal. That's survival. So if you're sitting there, wondering whether it's okay to step back, to stop trying, to let go of the people who never showed up when it counted, this is your answer. You're grown now. Handle it however you damn well need to.